You're listening to the SKYLIT Books podcast. We're an independent, general interest bookstore putting great reads in the hands of people in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles. Hosted by resident Skylighters, we're here to bring you new and exciting author conversations, group reads, and bookseller chats. Happy listening.
Hello, my beautiful listeners, and welcome to SKYLIT. This is the SKYLIT Books podcast, and I'm your host, Lance Morgan. Today, I'm so thrilled to welcome Iman Hariri-Kia to read from her new book, 100 Other Girls, followed by a conversation with editor Gabrielle Korn. Iman is a writer and editor born and raised in New York City. A nationally acclaimed journalist, she covers sex, relationships, identity, and adolescence. You can often find her writing about her personal life on the internet, much to her parents' dismay. She's currently based in New York City as well. Iman, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Really excited to chat with you. Thank you so much for having me on the pod.
No problem. How are you doing, Gabrielle?
Good. So excited to talk about this book.
I know, isn't it so exciting? I'm so excited to hear the conversation between both of you. But before that conversation, Iman, you have a reading for us?
Yes, I'm so excited. I'm going to read the first chapter, the beginning of the first chapter of the book. I think it gives like a great intro to Noora, our protagonist, as well as like the voice and POV. So I hope listeners enjoy it.
Ooh, I'm excited.
All right, well, then I'll take it from the top, the best place to take it. There's a special place in hell reserved for men who manspread on the subway. Take this one guy, mid-30s, hair slicked back with so much gel, you think he's speeding off to audition for the revival of Grease on Broadway. But given his clean-cut gray suit, leather briefcase, and the pace at which he's whispering into his earpiece, he's most likely in finance. My guess, investment banking or trading. I roll my eyes as he allows his right knee to meander a few inches wider, effectively taking up 3 whole subway seats. This is what I do when I'm anxious. I people watch. As a native New Yorker, studying different human species in the wild fills me with an odd sense of inner peace. It's like camping in the desert and staring up at the stars. It reminds me that the world is so much bigger than me and my anxiety. I suddenly notice an elderly woman without a seat clinging to one of the ceiling handlebars. Since Goldman Balzac is too distracted to give up an inch of space at the bench he and his junk have claimed as private territory, I offer her mine. She graciously accepts, and I smile at her. Honey, you should really fix that gap between your teeth, she tells me, her voice dripping with a thick Staten Island drawl. I stop smiling. New Yorkers are fucking crazy, myself included. Ladies and gentlemen, we are being held momentarily by the train's dispatcher. This is a Brooklyn Bridge-bound 6 local train. The next stop is Wall Street. Stand clear of the closing doors, please. I check my phone. It's 1:42, which means I only have 18 more minutes to get to South Street Seaport. I was planning on arriving 10 minutes early, but that's clearly no longer in the cards. Why do I even try to be on time when the universe so clearly has a vendetta against me? I flip open my camera and check out my reflection. My long black curly hair has gone totally frizzy due to the July heat, so I pat it down using a little bit of saliva, my thumb, and my forefinger. I straighten my nameplate necklace, which says Noora, written in Farsi. Noor means light, as in if I don't get my ass off the 6 train in the next 8 minutes, I'll never see the light of day again. I catch banker dude looking at me, looking at myself. At first, I think maybe he knows me from the internet. My blog, New York City, has around 22,000 followers. Substantial, considering it's mostly an internet black hole where I post incessant rants about the current state of our country, alongside pictures of my riskier outfits. My sister, Layla, is always telling me I need to step up my aesthetic to look like I care less about how many followers I have. She's a publicist, so she probably knows what she's talking about. I usually just tell her to fuck off. All of a sudden, I see a bright flash and realize that Binkerdouche was actually taking a picture of me fixing myself in the mirror. Great. That's all I need to become a viral meme. I'm about to go tell him where he can stick his phone when the train suddenly jolts and resumes moving. So I decide to stay put and review my interview talking points instead. When Layla first told me that her coworker had gotten a tip that the assistant to Loretta James, editor-in-chief of Vinyl magazine, had quit without giving notice, my entire body went numb. I've been reading Vinyl ever since getting an allowance as a kid. When a new issue came out each month, I'd use my entire $10 allotment on a copy of Vinyl an Oreo Hershey's bar, and a Diet Coke from the corner candy store. I even collected them, convinced that one day they'd be worth a fortune. My mother, unfortunately, hadn't seen it that way. She called it hoarding and threw out nearly every issue when I left home for NYU. As my good luck charm today, I've brought along the only copy she'd saved. For as long as I can remember, I've wanted to be a writer. And yeah, I know there's no money in writing. Magazines are dying, newspapers are selling out, and journalists are more interested in becoming celebrities than prolific authors. But that's not me. I still maintain that magazines like Vinyl saved my life. You see, my parents were immigrants, and while my mom and dad were able to give me a lot of things, advice was not one of their strong suits. They're from a different culture and a different time, and they're very good at talking at me, but not necessarily to me. I was essentially raised by three pillars: Layla, young adult novels, and magazines. I always had my head in between pages, reading back lines until I had them memorized. Vinyl became like an older friend. It taught me how to properly insert a tampon, select which political philosophy to subscribe to, and differentiate between an orgasm and an organism. Reading showed me the way during a particularly difficult time when I felt stuck between worlds: girlhood and womanhood, Iran and America. I've always vowed to one day become a writer myself and devote my life to my readers because, well, I was the reader. Actually, I am the reader. That's why I started New York City in the first place. You have to apply, Layla said. You can finally put that English degree of yours to good use. Can you imagine never having to explain what an Oxford comma is to another burly brat ever again? No, actually, I can't. Ever since graduating in May, I've been tutoring Manhattan private school kids, which actually means writing their essays for them while they bitch to me about their friends with fake IDs who go clubbing on Wednesday nights. She buys a table just so she can sit there and film herself getting bottle service and put it on her story. Eliza, one of my 15-year-old pupils, once complained to me, "It's honestly lame. Like, we get it. Your dad's a prince in Saudi Arabia or whatever." Oh my God, oops. Her hand flew over her mouth. "Isn't that where you're from?" I explained to her that while my family is from Iran, I was actually born in New York Hospital, several blocks away from where she lives. "Oh, sick," she said, relieved. "So you get it then." Put plainly, the job sucks, but as long as the kids get A's, I get paid. Plus, it's left a lot of time to write freelance pitches. Not that those have gotten me anywhere. No one ever responds to me, save for that Vice editor who wrote back once to ask if I'd ever been published anywhere other than my online diary. I cringe, remembering how angry that email had made me. My hands begin to shake, just as my chest tightens. Why did I ever think I could apply for a position like this? Vinyl is the magazine responsible for publishing last month's deep dive into the history of sexual misconduct during New York Fashion Week, for Christ's sakes. Last week, I wrote a blog post comparing my postgrad life to a charcuterie board. Why the fuck did I convince my grossly underqualified ass to apply? I snap out of my spiral just in time to realize we're pulling into the Fulton Street station. I run out of the train and up the subway steps, passing passerby. I'm careful not to let the heels of my tiny kitten mules get stuck in the crevices of the cobblestone streets. My body is clad in a slinky vintage slip, which was originally white with some sketchy discoloration when I found it, but after I tie-dyed it in Layla's bathroom, it was reborn. The dress feels like me, undiscovered potential. The right person just has to see it. I turn the corner on Varick Street and arrive at the Shifter and Pierce Publishing Tower. It's one of those buildings I've probably passed 100 times over the course of my life, but have never really seen before. It's made of old brick, probably about 50 floors, with large windows and beautiful veranda detailing, the kind that makes every room look like a Renaissance painting. It's dripping with old New York charm, and when I close my eyes, I can hear the clapping of typewriters and the barking of newsroom reporters in the 1920s. I can smell the smoke from their cigarettes wafting out onto the sidewalk. This is what I love about this city. Every neighborhood has its own personality and history. Every block has its own language and people. And every building has its own story, one that's constantly being edited by pedestrians who dare to enter. And when they exit for the very last time, they leave the ink wet for the next unsuspecting tenant. Now it's my turn to scribble something in its margins. Woo! Sorry. I don't know if I went over, but.
First of all, Iman, congratulations. I'm so excited for you. How's everything going and how does it feel?
Thank you so much. First of all, can I just say I'm so excited that you're the one talking to me today. For anyone listening at home, like I love Gabrielle as a person, editor, and a writer, and her debut, which was a memoir, was so incredible. If you haven't read it, you guys have to check it out.
You're
Okay,
the sweetest. Thank you.
I'll stop deflecting. But yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty crazy month. I know that this is going to be coming out right as the book publishes, but it's been really surreal watching this come to life. The book has been 30 years in the making for me. So being able to finally talk about it with people, I mean, it feels like a conversation I've had over and over in my head, but now it's now it's being played out in real time. It's pretty crazy.
When did you know that this was the book you were going to write?
That's a great question. I think that in some ways that this was a story that had really been percolating in the back of my head for a really long time. I definitely pulled inspiration from every job I've ever worked in media, from the entry level positions to the more higher up top editor positions. But I didn't really know that I was ready to start putting pen to paper until I felt particularly trapped in my job, sort of unsure of where I wanted to take my career. And all I knew is that I really wanted to have a project that felt like it was mine, to have a story that I could look forward to working on every week when I got home from work. And I think in many ways, this was the first story I had to tell to get off my chest before I could write anything else, because it's so personal. And because, as I said, it's just sort of been swimming around in the back of my head ever since I took my first position as an assistant.
The main character is obviously not you, but I do think that you have a lot in common with her. So where do you end and she begins?
I like to joke that this is autofiction summer because I feel like I've read a lot of autofiction in the last few months. But yeah, I definitely think that Noora is not me. Actually, no character in the book is directly inspired by anyone that I've met or worked with in the industry. I definitely fictionalized everything. And I think that it was important for me to do so, because I wanted to take liberties with the storytelling and really dramatize some of the stranger than fiction events that I watch play out in the workplace. But I do think that it was really important for me to have a main character who was a Middle Eastern American, because so often I have seen, I guess not even I've seen Middle Eastern American plot points because there's so little representation for Middle Eastern American characters in popular media, whether that's literature, TV, or movies. I often challenge people to tell me their favorite Middle Eastern actress, and they can't because there are so few parts for Middle Eastern actresses that there are very few household names. Um, but I really wanted to write a main character who was a woman of color, and a Middle Eastern woman, specifically like myself, who was messy and sort of going through it and unpredictable and unreliable, but also passionate and, a little bit starry eyed, because so often I do see women of color and specifically Middle Eastern women in roles where their religion or their race are very closely tied to their character outline or their arc, their story arc. And I wanted to sort of break from that mold and I guess to interrogate the difference between representation and tokenization through my writing at the same time that Noora, my main character, is navigating through the difference between representation and tokenization in the workplace.
I think you did that really, really well. And it's so funny that you went to.
Sorry.
Just take a compliment.
No, I'm terrible at that. Luckily, you're not here, so I can avoid your eyes.
Beauty of the screen. So one thing you just mentioned is that no one in the book is actually based on anyone. And that's so funny that you said that, because when I started reading it, I think I texted you and I was like, is vinyl nylon? And then I got to the part where there's a lesbian editor in chief, and I didn't text you this because I was like, don't be a narcissist. But I was like, is it me? And then I realized that like you must have everybody texting you that.
Yeah, I mean, you did text me about nylon and vinyl. And I mean, there's again, like, there's no person characters like workplace that's entirely one person character workplace. I want to make that very clear. But there are Easter eggs in this book for anyone that's been through it in the industry. And the name of vinyl, for example, is a cheeky nod. But I wouldn't say that Vinyl is a magazine that is directly tied to nylon in any way. I actually never worked for nylon, although I did work for a company that acquired nylon and knew people that worked there. Again, very tangentially, I witnessed a lot of things and experienced a lot of different things firsthand that all came together to create this like amalgam, like drama, workplace horror story comedy. Because again, like I was so taken aback by how insane life was writing itself for the entire time that I've been in the industry. That said, yes, like I got so many texts from people being like, wait, is this so and so? Or I remember this, and I'd have to correct them and be like, you couldn't remember that. I had invented it in my head unless, you've somehow tapped in.
Yeah, well, I think that's how you know you did a good job, because it's like everything feels like something that could have happened, to the point where it's like, do I remember this, or does it just fit in so well with like the actual universe?
Big. I will
Yeah.
say though that my sister read the first 5 pages and she was like, "Oh, you wrote this book about me." And every other person has read it and thought it was about me. So she actually put the book down, didn't pick it up for 3 years, and then read it as a Christmas gift to me this
Oh my
year.
God. And what did
So
she say when she finally read it?
she was like, "Yeah, you're right. I actually don't think I'm Noora. I'm way less annoying." That's on the nose. Thanks, Av.
Perfect sister comment.
Yeah, no, family is the one thing that I will say is my sister Ava, shout out Ava, has made sister relationships like Noora and Layla's very easy to write, because she is, I'm obsessed with her a totally normal amount. So.
Yeah, and that was one of like the truly sweet parts of the book, was this like sister love that endures no matter what. So one thing I really loved also was the way you wrote about just like the print digital divide in general. I think that is just like rife for dramatic writing, and it was really fun to read about. And what I loved was that neither camp really comes out looking like the good guys. Like everybody is behaving poorly. And I was wondering, did writing about that change your point of view about the situation? Like, did it give you more empathy, or like, did you go in to the writing process understanding that everybody is flawed?
Um, First of all, I just want to say I'm so sorry. I think my neighbors are vacuuming really
I can't
loudly.
hear it.
You can't hear it? Okay, amazing. Um, so I love that you said that, because it was very important to me to show that everyone, every actor, every team um, was incredibly morally gray and was operating in a zone that wasn't necessarily black or white. And I wanted the reader alongside Noora to constantly be recalculating who the good guys and who the bad guys were, and maybe even be taken aback or surprised at certain points by who they were rooting for. I've gotten messages from several people that, they ended up rooting for, the person that they least expected to by the end of the book. And the truth is, I went in with the understanding that both teams, and both people in those positions, digital media editors and old school print editors, are in impossible situations because they're in a situation. There's a system. There's this systemic issue with the industry that ultimately keeps them from being able to prioritize the reader. And I think that everyone working in media, and I think that everyone in this book goes through phases in which they're sort of unaware of the fact that they are being negatively impacted by this system, playing along with the system, actively fighting against the system. But ultimately, Noora has to decide for herself if she can operate within these means or if she has to, exit altogether in order for her to make a difference outside of the system. So I went in with that philosophy because, again, I was feeling sort of, as I mentioned, trapped myself or frustrated with this idea that no matter what I did, no matter what I wrote, no matter how many hits I got in a story, like I was working for a conglomerate, and I was like lining the pockets of like men I would never meet and people who would never know my name, and I was just feeling really, I guess, frustrated with the fact that the values of the industry weren't really aligning with like the objectives of the work. So I think that in the end of the day, like people always ask me, like, who's the villain in the story? Is it Loretta? Is it members of the digital team? Is it Noora? Because she so often is going against her own, best interests. I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but there are a few other people who perhaps act as anti-heroes in the book. And I always say the same thing. I don't think the real villain here is the system, is the industry in general, because it's setting up all these people who start as good faith actors to fail.
Yeah, totally. And I think another thing that felt really real about it that I'm so glad you included was the toll that it takes on her mental health. And you weave her struggles with anxiety throughout the whole book. And it's kind of like, of course, it evolves to the point that it does. But I thought it was a really interesting choice to include that. Can you talk about why that was important to you?
Yes. Well, I think that that was probably one of the most personal parts of the book for me. In my first job in media, I experienced like a pretty rapid decline in my own mental and physical health because I was working crazy hours and no longer taking care of myself to the best of my abilities. And it took a really long time for me to sort of reconcile the fact that there were direct parallels between, my quality of life while working and my work-life balance with, my, the experiencing my very first panic attacks. And, I started developing like really intense digestive issues and, different forms of like eczema. And I had an issue with my, my reproductive health, and all of these things just sort of like building up until something happened where I couldn't ignore it anymore. And it was almost like my body was speaking out loud for me and confronting me when my mind kept pushing back. And I wanted Noora to have a similar experience so that others, especially young people who are in entry level positions across different industries, who are, working 24/7 to the point of burnout, making very little money and being told that they're replaceable. So those people who are perhaps ignoring the signs against their better judgment can read about Noora's incident and hopefully allow that to be their own like sort of intervention period before their body does the same to them. So that was my hope there. And I mean, I think that there's been a lot of really incredible anxiety rep written in the last couple of years. especially. And I'm really proud to be writing during a period in which discussing mental health and mental illness is normalized and celebrated. And there was a place in the industry and in fiction for it.
Yeah, I think it'll really mean a lot to a lot of people. And I'm so sorry that that was your experience.
No, it's okay. I've actually never, no one's ever asked me actually about this. This is the first, I've done a lot of like conversations about the book in the last month, and you're the first person to ask me about the mental health rep, which I think,
Oh, great.
I wonder if this is because we both worked in media.
Yeah.
But I, talking about Easter eggs for people that and texts that I've been getting. I've never talked about this, although people in my life know it, but I actually had a very similar situation to Noora in the book. Except it didn't happen to me in a beauty closet. It happened to me in the bathrooms of the building I was working in. And I don't want to spoil anything for the book, but all I'll say is there were EMTs called and I did get rushed out of the building, but I was, if I remember correctly, the third person to have that happen to in 6 months, working for that specific brand. So I don't even know if other brands had experienced similar incidents in that 6-month period.
Oh,
but we had like a 30-person team, and this happened to 3 people in a 6-month period. So
did you continue working there?
yes, I did continue working there. But it was the first time that I realized that maybe there was an issue past just, like me not being tough enough to handle demanding work hours.
Right, which I'm sure is what was said to you.
Yeah, I think that people were concerned, definitely, but ultimately, like when you work in a newsroom or you work for you work in a situation in which you have to constantly be plugged in and online, something that you realize really quickly is you're unable to remove yourself from the news cycle and the cultural zeitgeist. So breaking news and quote unquote life or death situations are happening 24/7. So I think that incidents like mine are quickly forgotten because in 24 hours, it's time to put out another fire. So
Right. And like, let's be clear, a life and death situation would be like a celebrity hair change that needs to be written about, right?
yes, I'll never forget the person who trained me for my first ever job, who's actually a close friend of mine now, said to me while she was training me, remember that if you make a issue with return, that it's not the end of the world because we're not curing cancer. And I have to tell you so many times throughout the rest of my career, I'll remind myself that no one is dying and we're not curing cancer because we'll act as if like Kylie Jenner's baby name change is the equivalent of like, I don't know, an invasion of a foreign country. And it got to a point where when you're in the system for so long, you forget like what's reality and what's just you're trapped in this bubble where everyone's behaving almost like with a cult-like mentality. Shout out Amanda Montel.
Yeah, totally. And even the words like in the system, like it sounds like you're talking about prison.
I am so sorry, guys. Like I really don't mean to, I really, really don't mean to conflate my experience working in the media industry with the prison industrial complex or compare it to illness or current or world affairs. Obviously I'm being overly dramatic, but I'm just trying to get at the core, one of the core points of the book, which is when you're in a like-minded group of people and everyone's behaving a certain way and you want so badly to prove yourself and to make a difference, you'll suddenly feel yourself slowly starting to conform and maybe even become a little bit brainwashed by the process. So I think that that definitely happens to Noora in this book. And she has to navigate when she can sort of discern what she should actually do and what's good for her from what feels right in the moment. And I think that that is a choice and a decision that I had to make for myself many times, and I think a lot of people in media have had to make for themselves, but also just entry level employees across industries have to make for themselves.
Totally. And one thing I thought you captured well was that like this is a moment in time where women's media is not just doing like traditional women's mag coverage. Like there's a lot of really interesting work around identity being done and politics and stuff that feels like it has more weight to it than I think it did maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And so I love that she is part of that. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are in now this like post-Roe moment after spending a lot of time at women's magazines who were doing a lot of interesting coverage around abortion. Do you feel like change can still happen because of editorial content, or like how are you thinking about it now?
This is definitely something I go back and forth on a lot. And I definitely think that there are, I'm not going to say publications, but writers specifically who are doing incredible work when it comes to discussing. Um, I mean, we can use abortion as an example, discussing abortion, but also just writing about identity in a way that's nuanced and isn't in any way exploitative. I do think that there's always going to be an issue when you have to reconcile the values of a company with the values of the content that it publishes. And I think that that's a decision that every reader and writer has to make for themselves, whether the value of the output, um, you know, whether it, uh, whether it's more valuable than I'm not putting this the right way. I guess I just mean to say, um, if a story can have a real impact, doesn't matter then that the company profiting from it are funding, companies that are doing the opposite or have the opposite values. And doesn't matter that perhaps the publication published a story with the opposite takeaway like a week before, for example. Um, and for me, I think that I still believe in the value of storytelling. I think that once we can figure out how to properly fund media and properly compensate writers and pay them directly for their work, I think that this will become a lot less muddied. I don't have an answer for it yet. I can't fix the broken media system. Um, Although I think everyone that enters it tries to a certain extent. But I do think that there's a way to impact people editorially, and that's through vulnerable storytelling that resonates on a deeper level with people, and moves them enough that it leads them to have conversations with people who might disagree with them. And then those conversations, I think, can lead people to enact real, tangible change. And I've always believed that. Um, I just think that perhaps the format through which that storytelling takes place needs to change and will change in the next decade. Um, and I also just think that publications need to get better at practicing what they preach. Like I think that publications are made of really, really wonderful, smart, dedicated people who are talented and really do want to create change and to reach people. But I think that oftentimes they're put in compromising positions where they have to sacrifice their morals or really question their morals. So I guess if anyone working for a publication in a position of power is listening to this, my biggest piece of advice that's always like the smallest thing you can do is make sure that if you're hiring people to write about certain issues or you're hiring marginalized writers to write about their experiences with marginalization, you're also hiring them to write about other things. Don't put them in positions where they feel like they have to exploit their own experiences, their own trauma, their own identities in order to, get you clicks. Um, you know, Trust me, like the writer that would kill a story about abortion probably also cares about The Bachelor or cares about, a million other things that they would be incredible at writing at. Don't put them in a position where they're only good for the emotional overhaul of writing about the thing that triggers them most. So, yeah.
Plus
Sorry,
one,
long answer.
no,
Long
plus one to all of that. That was so great and super important. My last question is, what is next for you?
What is next for me? That's a great question too. I have a lot of really exciting projects in the pipeline that I am hoping to be able to talk about in the next couple of months. But I've been writing up a storm, and I'm really thrilled that I get to tell more stories now that I've taken the story of 100 other girls and fleshed it out and gotten it off my chest. I feel like a weight has been lifted. Um, so I'm excited to sort of see what is possible for me and what else I can do now that I feel like I can breathe again. I'm writing a monthly newsletter called Cherry Picked, in which I sort of interrogate growing up at any age. And I really enjoyed being able to return to my roots, which are essays, and enjoy just getting to write for fun and reach an audience of people who are familiar with my writing style. So that's coming up. But once this book comes out, I'm kind of hoping I can sleep well for a week, because I definitely have been waking up in the middle of the night and being like, we should send an advanced reader copy to this person, or have we thought about, 1, 2, and 3. So I'm just really, really excited to finally be able to talk to people like you about the book and to connect with the readers and to hopefully think and enjoy books that aren't my own. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, it was so lovely to talk to you.
Well, it was so, so nice to chat with you. Thank you so much for having us, Skylight.
No, it was
And
great talk. It was great hearing both of you talk. Thank you so much for coming on.
of
Um,
course,
yeah, to our listeners, you can go buy 100 Other Girls right now. That's your local bookstore. If you're in LA listening, Skylight Books, you can go to Skylight, grab yourself a copy, and just have a great time. Iman and Gabrielle, is there anything you would like to say to our listeners and just fans of independent bookstores?
I'll say that if you do go to Skylight and get the book, can you please send me a photo, because I'm not based in LA and I'll never be able to see it. No, but in all honesty, I'm just really, really excited to get this book into the hands of readers. If you do end up reading and want to chat further about anything we touched on, you can find me at Iman Hariri-Kia on Instagram and on TikTok. And I am just really grateful. DM me photos of the book. I'm actually not kidding. I will send them, every single one, to my mom. She has a folder on her phone that's just pictures that people have sent to the book. So do it to make my mom happy.
And that's what a better better reason do you need? Like, I can't think of one. Gabrielle, anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, totally buy this book, buy it from Skylight. And I will say this is my second event with Skylight since moving to LA. And I just think that you guys are such a great bookstore and resource. I felt so welcome when I did an in-person event, and buy your books from independent bookstores.
I couldn't say better myself. Listeners, this was Iman Hariri-Kia and Gabrielle Korn in conversation about 100 Other Girls, now on sale. I did say that already, but I'll say it one more time because it needs to be said. Thank you all for listening. If you're new, please come back. We have some great episodes on the way, and listen to our other episodes that we've had already. If you're returning, thank you for returning. We love you, and we appreciate all of you out there. You all have a great day and take care of yourselves. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Skylight Books podcast series. Please don't forget to visit our website at skylightbooks.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more author talks and bookseller conversations. You can find us on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you back in our store soon.